In the quiet rural outskirts of Virginia, the year 1008, 134 stands as one of the most unsettling chapters in early American history. It was a time when plantations stretched endlessly across rolling hills, when towns were small and word of mouth traveled faster than any official record. But among these calm farmlands and wooden houses, the name Sullivan would soon echo like a curse, whispered across generations. This story begins with a family that had lived in Virginia for nearly 3 decades, respected by some, feared by others, and largely hidden behind tall fields, locked doors, and silence that no one dared to question. The Sullivan family owned a sprawling property on the edge of Albemarle County, surrounded by thick forests that muffled the sound of anything that might have happened beyond the trees. People in the nearby village often spoke about how the Sullivans lived differently, almost reclusively. The patriarch, Harold Sullivan, was known as a strict, rigid man whose expression rarely shifted from stern to anything softer. His wife, Margaret, carried an air of constant worry, as if she stayed quietly terrified of something that no one else could see. Despite the family's uneasy reputation, few villagers knew what truly happened within the walls of the Sullivan estate. Children from nearby farms had gone missing over the years, but because the region was still developing, with families moving frequently, the disappearances were often dismissed as runaways or families relocating. No one connected the dots. No one imagined the truth, and no one suspected that a basement beneath the Sullivan home concealed one of the darkest discoveries in early American crime history. The story truly began to unravel in the late autumn of 1008, 134, when a young farmhand named Elijah Turner grew suspicious of the strange activity he saw one evening near the edge of Sullivan property. Elijah was only 16, working for a neighboring landowner. But one night, while gathering stray cattle, he witnessed Harold Sullivan dragging a large wooden crate toward the basement door at the back of the house. What made it strange was the hour. It was close to midnight, and the isolation of the property made the sight even more chilling. Elijah later claimed he heard faint cries or whispers from inside the crate, sounds too soft to identify but too human to ignore. He told his father, who hesitated to get involved. The Sullivans were powerful, well, connected, and feared for a reason. But Elijah persisted, insisting that something was deeply wrong. And so, against the silence of the night, Elijah's father rode into town to alert the sheriff, a man named Thomas Ridley, who had never been one to ignore a young man's concern. Ridley gathered 2 deputies and followed Elijah back to the Sullivan home at sunrise the next morning. When they arrived, Harold and Margaret appeared strangely calm, offering polite greetings as if nothing unusual had occurred. Ridley asked to inspect the property, citing reports of missing local children and new information shared by Elijah. Harold refused, claiming it was an invasion of his family's privacy. But 2 things changed everything. The first was the unmistakable sound that drifted from beneath the floorboards, soft, trembling, almost like a muffled sob. The second was the discovery of a small shoe lying near the basement door, far too tiny to belong to anyone in the Sullivan family. At that moment, Sheriff Ridley made his decision. He ordered Harold to step aside, and after forcing the cellar door open, he and the deputies descended into the darkness. Elijah and his father waited outside, hearing nothing but the creak of wooden steps followed by a long, chilling silence. What Ridley found below would haunt him for the rest of his life. The basement was large, far larger than the house above suggested, Lantern light revealed rows of makeshift sleeping areas, tattered blankets, and crude wooden bowls lined against the walls. But the most horrifying detail was the sight of dozens of children, 47 in total, sitting or lying on the cold stone floor, weak, frightened, and chained together with iron restraints. Their faces reflected years of fear, deprivation, and confusion. Some were too young to speak. Others were old enough to understand that they had been kept hidden from the world for reasons beyond their comprehension. The deputies froze, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Ridley stepped forward, his voice breaking as he gently asked the children their names. Some answered, some could not. Some simply cried at the sight of a stranger who was not Harold or Margaret Sullivan. The Sullivans were immediately restrained and brought upstairs, where Margaret collapsed in tears, insisting she had tried to help the children but had been forced into silence by her husband. Harold refused to speak entirely, standing with his jaw tightened, eyes cold and unblinking. He offered no explanation, no denial, no regret. To this day, historians are unsure whether he acted alone, whether Margaret was complicit, or whether there were deeper, more sinister motives tied to the years of abductions. As the children were carried out one by one, the villagers gathered in shock. Many recognized faces they hadn't seen in months or years. Others were strangers, children taken from distant counties or traveling families who had passed through the region. The rescue took hours, and the story spread rapidly across Virginia and eventually across early American newspapers, becoming one of the first widely documented child abduction cases in U.S. history. In the days that followed, investigators examined the Sullivan property more thoroughly. They found old records, maps, and notebooks written in Harold's handwriting, yet none fully explained why he had taken the children or what he intended to do with them. Some suggested he believed he was creating a workforce for the estate. Others believed he suffered from delusions or a twisted ideology. Some even theorized he was replicating a system he had grown up witnessing elsewhere. But no theory was ever proven. The children were taken to nearby shelters and homes where local families volunteered to care for them. Many could not recall where they had come from. Others slowly regained memories of their homes, their parents, or the moment they were taken. It took months for some to recover physically, and for others, recovery was never complete. As for the Sullivans, Harold was tried and convicted under charges that were rare for the time, including unlawful confinement and kidnapping, though the legal system in 134 had no exact terminology for crimes as severe as these. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Margaret's fate was more complicated. Some believed she deserved sympathy. Others believed her tears were nothing but fear of being caught. She was eventually sentenced to 10 years for complicity, though many felt the punishment was too light. The Sullivan house was abandoned soon after, left empty to rot under the shadows of the surrounding forest. The basement, once a hidden chamber of suffering, became a place no one dared to approach. Over the years, the house collapsed, reclaimed by vines and earth, leaving behind nothing but scattered stones and remnants of its foundation. Local legends grew around the area, with travelers claiming to hear faint voices at night or the sound of chains dragging across the ground. Whether these stories were real or simply fueled by the dark history of the land, no one can say. Today, the Sullivan case remains one of the most disturbing and mysterious events in early Virginia history, because records from the Hundreds were limited and inconsistently preserved. Many details about the family, their motives, and the identities of all 47 children remain incomplete. Some historians argue that the event is partially mythologized, expanded by retellings over generations. Others maintain that court transcripts and early newspaper accounts confirm the essential truth of the case. What we do know is that the Sullivan basement stood as a reminder of how darkness can thrive behind the appearance of normalcy, how isolation can hide secrets, and how the silence of a community can allow atrocities to grow unchecked. And yet, the most important part of this story is not the family who committed these acts, but the children who survived. Many went on to rebuild their lives, adopting new families or returning to their biological ones. Some became advocates in their adulthood, pushing for stronger child protection laws in the decades that followed. Though their voices were once silenced beneath the ground, their survival created lasting echoes in the legal and moral landscape of America. The tragedy of the Sullivan family basement serves as a cautionary tale of vigilance, of listening to instincts, and of understanding that evil often hides in the last places we expect. Even today, researchers and storytellers continue to revisit the case, not because of its horror, but because of the resilience of the children who endured it. In the end, the story is a chilling reminder that the past is full of shadows, but every shadow is illuminated eventually. The courage of a single young farmhand, willing to speak when no one else would, changed the fate of 47 innocent lives and exposed a truth that otherwise might have remained buried forever. And so, the Sullivan story remains a testament to the unmatched power of courage, compassion, and the human will to seek justice, even in the darkest corners of history.